He told him to sit down, and the world watched in silence. But then came one reply that shook every leader in that hall. It was a charged afternoon inside a jam-packed hall at a major global summit. The atmosphere buzzed with tension, low murmurs bouncing off the walls. Leaders from every corner of the world had assembled, but two individuals drew more attention than anyone else. One was former US President Donald Trump, famous for his direct approach and explosive rhetoric. The other was Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the bold and youthful head of Burkina Faso. As the cameras locked in, Trump stepped forward confident and assertive. His eyes scanned the crowd before settling squarely on Traoré. "Sit down," he commanded. Coldly, his words slicing through the whispers like a bolt of lightning. For a heartbeat, silence. The audience gasped. Everyone assumed Traoré would retreat, yield to the older, more dominant figure. But his eyes held steady. His jaw tightened. His stance grew firm. This wasn't just another political standoff. It was a moment of bravery, a battle of resolve. Most watching had no idea of Traoré's past. He had grown up in a land battered by hardship and conflict, where many lives, including those of his own friends and relatives, had been lost to forgotten. Wars. His purpose wasn't rooted in politics alone. It ran deeper. As a boy, he had seen his nation suffer in silence, overshadowed by the agendas of the powerful. Now, facing Trump, he stood not just as a leader, but as a voice for millions. He wasn't protecting a title. He was standing guard over the pride of his people. The world saw a captain, but inside, Traoré felt the burden of history pressing down, reminding him that this moment meant more than himself. When Trump ordered him to sit, it wasn't just an instruction. It was a threat to everything he represented. Then Traoré replied. His tone was even, steady. It carried a quiet fire that reached every corner of the room. "No, Mr. Trump," he said with calm conviction. "I will stand for my people, for my nation, and for the truth." The room froze. Eyes widened. Breaths halted. What seemed like defiance became a symbol, a signal, a spark of something greater. Trump's face showed a flicker of surprise, maybe even respect. Traoré's words weren't merely a retort. They were a statement, a bold declaration that the world's balance was shifting, that young African leaders would no longer be dismissed or silenced. That one moment, raw, alive, unforgettable, marked a turning point. It marked the dawn of a new era in international politics, one where bravery and honor stood firmly against the dominance of the past. After Traoré's fearless stand, the entire summit seemed to pause in time. Flashbulbs burst. Journalists murmured, and global leaders exchanged uneasy looks. The traditional hierarchy, where age, power, and wealth demanded reverence, was suddenly upended. Trump's expression tightened, clearly unsettled. This young commander from a modest West African country wasn't simply holding his position, was casting a glaring light on deep-rooted global injustice. Traoré's eyes were firm, unblinking in the face of such a historic moment. He wasn't furious, only fiercely resolved. The audience felt the weight of his presence, the force behind every word he spoke. This had surpassed politics. It had become a cry for fairness, for pride, for those who had long been ignored. In Burkina Faso, Traoré's path had been carved by adversity and grief. His own village had endured repeated attacks from armed factions. He had lost friends in childhood, and the terrifying memories of those smoke-filled nights, when even the stars vanished, never left his mind. Yet, this was equally a story of resilience. Traoré had discovered young that real bravery wasn't about lacking fear. It was about choosing to stand tall in spite of it. Every stance he took on that platform was rooted in those painful memories. He wasn't protecting just himself. He was representing every family that had suffered silently. Around the world, headlines exploded. Videos of the standoff spread across social media within moments. Some praised Traore as a symbol of strength and integrity. Others debated what his defiance meant. But in Burkina Faso, where many watched on unstable mobile signals, hearts swelled with pride. Their president wasn't just a ceremonial leader, he was a man who dared to speak loudly where others stayed quiet. And deep within, Traore understood. This was only the start. The summit's cameras kept recording, but behind the scenes, a new tension filled the air. Diplomats whispered urgently in secluded corners. Many were stunned, not just by Traore's refusal to yield, but by the power in his voice. Some questioned how a young president from a small African state could face off against a figure as towering as Trump, but others noticed the flame in Traore's eyes, a fire that refused to be ignored. In those quiet exchanges, his name began to be spoken with a new weight, respect. And beneath it all, an undercurrent of quiet admiration. A new era in global leadership was taking shape, silently but unmistakably. Later that evening, Traore sat by himself in his hotel room, the intensity of the day still heavy on his shoulders. Outside, the city lights flickered, but his heart was elsewhere back in Burkina Faso. He thought of broken families, victims of relentless violence, of voiceless children, and of dreams that now seemed distant, almost unreachable. It was overwhelming. The responsibility of leadership weighed far more than many could ever grasp. But he reminded himself why he stood firm, to offer hope, to speak for those no one else would. This moment wasn't just a response to Trump. It was a declaration. On behalf of his people, by morning, the summit resumed. Cameras panned to faces around the world, millions watching with bated breath. The atmosphere was dense with anticipation. Trump, normally unflinching, appeared more restrained. When he spoke, his words were careful, his tone subdued. But it was Traore who commanded the room without saying a word. His silent confidence had already echoed louder than any speech. That moment signaled a shift. The global stage was beginning to pay attention, not only to the message, but to the messenger. And for the first time in generations, the voice of a young African leader was cutting through, heard clearly by the entire world. As discussions continued, an unseen storm gathered. The room hummed with murmurs, the tension nearly visible. Traore remained composed, calmly observing the faces around him. He understood this wasn't just another summit, it was a crossroads. Every glance, every lull in conversation, felt loaded with unspoken tests. Trump, often bold and brash, now seemed more deliberate, less confrontational, more calculated. The world watched, uncertain of what would unfold next. And yet, it was Traore's silence that resonated most. It was the stillness before a surge of courage and purpose, one that threatened to shake the old order to its core. That night, back in his hotel room, Traore's thoughts returned once more to his homeland. He envisioned the children playing in dusty streets, unheard in the corridors of power. He remembered the mothers who prayed for safety and the fathers who labored endlessly to provide. His stand at that summit went far beyond politics. It was rooted in something far deeper. It was personal. Every sentence he uttered, every moment he held the room's attention, was filled with the dreams and the struggles of his people. With emotion welling in his eyes, Traore made a silent vow to never let the hopes of his people fade, no matter what price he had to pay. The following day, cameras captured Traore standing firm as he addressed the summit. His tone was calm, yet carried an undeniable passion that seemed to ripple through the entire hall. He spoke of fairness, of honor, and of mutual respect, not only for Burkina Faso, but for all the nations that had long been overlooked. The impact was visible. Some leaders nodded gently, others discreetly wiped their eyes. This wasn't just another diplomatic speech. It was a stirring reminder that Real power isn't found in riches or military might, but in integrity, in heart, and in unshakable conviction. And in that instant, Traore's words etched themselves into memory words that would echo far beyond the walls of that summit. The room grew still as Trump leaned in, eyes locked on Traore. "Captain," he said sharply, "why should the world listen to you?" It was a challenge, crafted to rattle him, to question his place on the stage. But Traore didn't blink. Instead, a calm and quiet smile formed on his face. "I don't speak only for myself," he said, voice steady and clear. "I speak for every mother who lies awake worrying for her child's future, for every father who labors endlessly to create a better life, for every soul whose voice has gone unheard for far too long." Silence fell. The crowd wasn't ready for that kind of truth. It wasn't just another moment in politics. It was humanity, raw and unfiltered, breaking through the rigid surface. The world wasn't watching a debate. It was witnessing the soul of a true leader. After finishing, Traore quietly returned to his seat, gaze steady, posture composed. The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, but profound. Trump opened his mouth, perhaps ready to reply, but paused. Something in the room, something in the moment, stopped him. Traore's words hung in the air, like both a quiet challenge and a solemn promise. Everyone present could feel that this wasn't just a clash of ideas. It was a defining moment, a test of honor, respect, and courage. And Traore, armed only with his truth, had already touched hearts around the globe. As the summit went on, the conversation softened. The atmosphere shifted. Traore's calm resolve had left a mark. People began to speak less with ego and more with intention. Beyond the walls of the summit, the world was watching. And from every corner of the globe, clips of his stand were being shared, one voice cutting through the noise, carrying a message the world could no longer ignore. A confrontation like no other. Tears rolled down cheeks as people across the globe watched a young leader hold his ground against immense pressure. Messages flooded in from every corner of the planet, filled with gratitude, inspiration, and a rising sense of hope that real change might finally be within reach. For Traore, this was never just about politics. It was something deeper, deeply personal. And now, the world was beginning to see why. The atmosphere in the summit hall was electric. After tense debates and long silences, something had clearly shifted. Traore's fearless composure and quiet wisdom had begun to ripple far beyond the walls of the conference. Whispers turned into dialogue. Dialogue grew into admiration. Even skeptics found themselves looking at Traore with a new level of respect. He was no longer just a young president from Burkina Faso. He had become something greater, a symbol of strength, a voice for those so often ignored. That night, as Traore prepared to leave the venue, he understood the truth. This wasn't about winning a debate. It was about igniting something, a spark of hope that could burn bright in the hearts of millions. Back home, news of the confrontation spread like wildfire. Families gathered around televisions and radios, faces glowing with pride, eyes glistening with emotion. Children saw in him a role model, someone who stood tall when the world tried to make him shrink. Mothers whispered prayers of thanks, and fathers spoke of the strength they wished their children would grow up to carry. Traore's words had reached far beyond borders. They had crossed oceans. He wasn't standing up for just Burkina Faso, he was standing up for the value of human dignity everywhere. His courage had already begun to form a legacy, one that would live on in the hearts of those inspired to dream bigger, speak louder, and believe in a better future. In the days that followed, the world responded. Politicians, activists, and everyday citizens couldn't stop talking about what they had witnessed. Traore's bold reply wasn't simply a comeback. It was a statement, a declaration that respect is earned through truth, through bravery, and through unshakable conviction. As footage of that moment spread online, millions were moved, many to tears. If you felt the impact of this moment, if Traore's courage touched your soul, don't let it stay with just you. Hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us how this story reached your heart, because your voice matters too. Together, we can keep hope alive and inspire more stories of strength and leadership, just like that of Ibrahim Traoré. This wasn't about power or pride. It was a promise made in silence to carry the pain and still choose to stand.